What defines a painting? Is it when you have acrylic or an oil-based medium and it's put on a 2D canvas? Or does the canvas being flat matter when you say the word painting? What happens when the painting becomes more sculptural? At what point does a painting become mixed media? Does the material matter? Does the surface matter? Does it even have to be made out of paint? Can a collage be a painting? In today's interview with Niki Keenan, I asked these questions about her work. Her work is full of forest motifs. It has a sense of light that's irresistible. And her recent work, which is full of shapes similar to butterfly wings and tree pods and cones, really pushes the boundary of what a painting is. In this conversation with Niki, we learn about intuition, about what it takes to be a rower and translate that into artistic practice, and about how she translates what it feels like to stand in a forest and feel surrounded. This is Brushwork. Hey, Niki. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me.
Brushwork is delighted to have another artist from the Pacific Northwest here. It's a cloudy, rainy day. It kind of feels like fall is approaching, which is really nice.
Yes, and you're in my studio.
I'm in your studio. This is Niki's studio. I will show you images of her work soon, and we'll go through some works in progress at some point later on. I'm very excited, but for people who've never seen your work before, can you tell me what it's about and what it looks like?
Yeah, I make paintings. I say I make paintings about scenes that take my breath away because I'm trying to capture a moment. Mm-hmm. Usually it's the sun coming through, often Pacific Northwest forest, gardens, waterways, the sunset in my backyard. And because I feel like there are these fleeting moments, there's a lot of motion in my paintings. There's a lot of bright colors. I'm thinking about how I feel when I'm in the landscape, which isn't just what's captured in a photograph. So I'm thinking about the color combo, vibration. So I think they're pretty vibrant pieces.
Totally. They're super vibrant. There's lots of great colors and there's lots of...
Laughing at my cat.
We got a cat in here.
Cat in the sculpture.
Does your cat almost always knock things down constantly?
He's only done this once before. He's now chewing on part of the sculpture.
I love cats because they're what if I show off when there's a guest
right
around?
It's I think she liked this last time I did that.
When's the first time you painted a landscape painting?
Oh, first time I painted a landscape painting. Well, probably the first time I painted, and that would be when I was at 4. 4 is when I remember. And I actually have photographic evidence. I used to paint with water on the fence. I grew up in Texas, and my mom gave me a pail of water and a big brush.
So
and the photos they're 2 photos. They're amazing. Yeah, and I remember painting landscapes, a place I could be in. And in Texas, it's so hot that I could paint a big section of the fence and then it would dry and I could do it again. And so I think, I started painting really quickly.
Your mother's a genius.
I know. It was yeah. And from the pool, I would take my, maybe everybody does this, take your finger, put it in the water and put it on the concrete. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm. It evaporates so fast.
Yeah.
That is so cute. What a mess-free way to keep a child entertained. Here is a bucket and a brush.
Yes.
Go paint the wall. Thanks, Mom. That's so cute.
She would get so excited when I would bring her things. I got used to that sort of general praise.
You're oh, yeah, thank you for acknowledging my creativity. Praised for it.
I certainly got that with making things. I like to make, knitting crafts, drawings. My mom loved them, but I had a high school teacher who saw me. He was you're I don't know that we were using the word creative very much back then. I would make something and then we would talk about it. There were things to talk about. He was fully engaged. Yeah.
It's so nice to have a formative teacher, especially that young, who actually takes whatever mess you're making seriously and engages with you.
Yeah.
And gives you value to what you're making. I had a couple of high school teachers who were like that when I was just oh, this thing that I'm just casually doing is worth something. And it makes a huge difference. I was I didn't know you could be an artist till this moment. Yeah. I was art is just something you do
casually for fun, because that's what my homework seemed like. But then an artist comes in and tells you you're doing something cool, and you're just like, oh yeah. Anyways.
Because it resonated with what you knew was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Delicious.
Yeah. I remember the way that, like, seeing, to me, he was a real artist, and the way he looked at things was just so engaged, I guess is the way, is like curious and focused, and I feel like I just like started mimicking all that, and then
It's delicious. Mm-hmm. When you are painting nature and you're painting, because that's like such a major motif of yours, what is something that you must go out a lot? You must go out into the fields a lot, into the forest. I mean, I can tell because I look at your work. What is something that when you're, in the field, that is something that captures you and you're just like, that's something I should paint, or that's some motif that I should implement?
Yeah, the most obvious one for me is the sun, because I will stop when it's coming through the trees and on my eyes. I'll stop and I'll just want it to, and I'll sway and I'll want it to follow me, and I'll just connect with it. And it does feel like, and it's the thing that kind of, I'm like trying to take pictures like, oh, like that, when it's on that leaf and it's on the side of that tree, and when it's on the moss, and and it never, the photos never really come out like that, but it's and I think it's all of it, the sounds, the way the earth feels under your feet, the smells. And that's why when I'm painting those things, I want it to feel like I'm inside of it in the same way that I experience it in person.
Do you feel like you're capturing those sounds when you paint? Or that feeling? It's less about what you're really seeing and more about the feeling.
More about the feeling, all about the feeling, and about the feeling of something being behind you, underneath you, above you, in you, and I think the way I find that, I don't really think about it intellectually when I'm painting, but I think it's obvious, it's happening. Like the parts I am thinking about is like, can I imagine the sun coming through this panel? What is it about the sound? Well, sound is vibration, so I'm finding that with color and surprising color combinations feel like they kind of get me, move my body like, ooh, and that's a similar experience of what it might feel like to actually be there. So it is all about that. How does it feel? Not what does it look like?
There's a couple of paintings here in your studio. When I look at this one above your couch, I feel the atmosphere really heavy. I'm like, oh, I feel what kind of day it is, what time it feels like. And I feel like that's something that is hard to do, even with your work, which is leaning towards more abstraction than realism. And it just feels good to look at. You're just like, oh, I'm here in this moment that Niki was in. And that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's hard to do. I feel like sometimes people, or let's say me, myself, when I go out into the field and I do something plein air even, trying to capture the sense of how much water is in the air and the sense of like my own mood that's happening it takes a lot of practice. So
I think about, that's very, thank you. I think about the place I feel it in my body, like the temperature and stuff, I feel it on my cheeks. Like what would that feel like to like get that breath of fresh air like on your face? And I think there's something about, I was a rower for many years, and I think being an athlete on the water helps you connect with space, like with nature in that way, like your body's in it. It's fully in it.
Totally.
You're feeling it. You're breathing with it. That might be a library bank that I pull from.
Do you find that there are moments from when you were rowing, lessons from that translate really to your art?
If I zoom out, there's so many things. Like rowing, I tried so hard, and with painting, I'm more natural at it. So those are just sort of life lessons. Like do the thing you're natural at. But I think expressing with my body is probably a place that they both have overlap. There's something about when I was rowing, especially when you're rowing in small boats, you need to steer, but you're going backwards. So you have to kind of focus at something far in front of you and like kind of line yourself up with that. And then everything around you is like whirring by you. It's just like, and you're just focused on the one thing way over there. Yeah. And I think my paintings have that either innately or because of my rowing experience. It is a lot about that very far point and everything else that's happening around it. And often the far point is the sun, but yeah.
There's movement. There's things happening.
Movement, yeah. Like maybe an anchor point, but around you is sort of fluid.
It's your work is a lot more spatial than I initially anticipated until this conversation.
Okay,
I was like, oh wow, yeah, you are really encompassing not just what's in front, but what is all around and how that influences everything else. And that's That's interesting. Do you find that your sculptural work is able to tap into that more?
Yeah, the sculptural work was really a way, I don't know if I set out for this. I mean, maybe, but it was a way to talk about some themes in my life in a three-dimensional form. So I've made these conical shapes that are inverted and they are oriented like in an hourglass shaped configuration. So the points are almost touching. Yeah. And in that, I feel like, again, that like focusing on a point showed up in my 2D paintings. And now in these 3D pieces are like, it's a way for me to talk about themes like celestial versus terrestrial, mirroring, as above, so below, but also like that point where things are like the now, in an hourglass, the point in the center is the now. And in these large pieces, the painting is more dense near the point and everything down low is like more ephemeral, and thinking of connection and two things meeting and that point being like intuition, right timing. Yeah. Lots of themes. There's so many themes that came out in the sculptures are coming out.
I love it. What was the catalyst from moving from a 2D painting to a sculpture?
I think it came from a need because I was doing some work for Party in the Park. It's an event at the Seattle Art Museum, a fundraising event, and I wanted to fill a space in a different way. Really, it brought me full circle to what I've always done. When I was a kid, I made things. I made clay, paper mache, huge tree in my room. Like, I mean, I made things all the time, and for some reason, maybe forgot about that, or maybe it wasn't time for it to come back in. And once I opened up that door, it's just, as you can see in my studio, came like the floodgates are opening to three-dimensional work.
I noticed the biggest shift happened probably around pandemic time when I looked at your Instagram page and I was like, oh, it's flat. Then the cones started appearing.
Yeah, I think I wanted a painting to be able to fill the inside of the Packer Pavilion at the Olympic Sculpture Park. And I was like, well, you want to see it from all sides. And then I was making these motions with my hands. You can't see it on the podcast, but like, just like as if like some information was coming from above and then meeting it from below. And I was like, oh, this is what I think about in my life anyway, with spirituality and all the other things I'm interested in.
What are the other things you're interested in?
Well, I'm interested in intuition, animal communication would be one of them. And I think of these things as there's so much information around, and then at some point, two things connect, and it's co-creation. Maybe it's two of your parts are connecting, of your own parts, or it's non-physical connecting with you, and it's in this moment of like, oh yeah, I got this idea. Oh yeah, maybe it's a eureka moment, maybe, but I feel like it's happening all the time, and there are no words is part of it. I think that's part of why I'm working it out in paint.
In color.
Yeah.
There's this point where when Niki stacks two of the cones and they meet at the tip, and it just feels like electric when you're looking at it, because it's a subtle sort of touch, but it's like there's the weight of what's underneath and the weight of like what's pressing down. And she has they're 3D. You walk all the way around them. They're kaleidoscopic, and it's subtle, but it's like so interesting. When you think about your spirituality and knowing about that, I think it makes it even more, I don't know, just meaningful. And sometimes I feel a lot of what the artists intend to happen when they're seeing a work, it gets lost in just anyone viewing it. It's not always spelled out for you. And that's some of the beauty of it. It's very fluid, which I love. And I think it's very cool. And I don't know, it's just interesting. Yeah. This is why we have interviews.
Yeah. And I think the newer pieces that are, I made the conical pieces, and now they're kind of on the same theme, but they're more lyrical, and they're like, I felt like they wanted to move more, and they're more organic shaped, like petals or wings, but they're still talking about the same thing.
Have you ever thought about putting them on a moving device?
Wow.
So
thanks for adding another thing in.
I made up ideas.
Another challenge to solve. Someone did say that it would be cool to put mirrors behind or around in some way around the cones, and that made a lot of sense.
So before you started showing your sculptures, I really would have called you a painter, and I'm wondering what you identify as an artist now.
Yeah, I was talking with someone about this the other day, is that I still think of myself as a painter. I don't know if that will change. I think maybe because I think in paint.
Yeah.
Color relationships and my mark still feels really important, even in these sculpture pieces. That in a way, I'm making them 3-dimensional so that I can continue this quest to feel like I'm surrounded by the painting.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what happens in painting is just like this whole world opens up. Like I'm looking at this piece behind you that's like has a field of turquoise, and then there's just like this brushstroke of the raw umber, and in that is a whole world. And that's how I think the 2D pieces feel 3-dimensional to me.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where the lines get blurred a little
Painting
bit.
is the same. I feel like sometimes I look at pieces that people do that might be a collage, and I'm like, that's a painting. Like the way I think about painting is not necessarily tied to the medium. It's like the way of seeing. And maybe it's incorrect and I should pick a different label, but it's just like, it's fascinating.
We get to make it up.
We get to make it up. Because we're artists and that's our license. What was it like returning to plasterwork and returning to making pieces that are literally bigger than Niki?
The first plaster pieces I made were smaller, so I got to get the reintroduction that way they're like oversized helicopter seeds, so maybe like 3 feet.
Yeah.
Before I got into these huge ones behind us, I immediately I felt like I was a child. I felt like I was just playing. I remember thinking I was like, oh, I'm really tired of the labor that it takes to make canvases. Because I would spend so much time on them, and then I just really wanted to paint. So I got them made by an artisan in Gig Harbor. It's fantastic. I'm so happy to have them. And the minute I got those delivered, I started in on this plaster work. So it's like, it's not that I didn't want to make. I think I wanted to make something that was maybe be more gritty.
It looks like a lot of fun to make. Like when I look at even just like the beginnings of some of these pieces, I've got like bulldog clips on them to keep I'm just like, these look so fun to make. And then to like color on top of, I'm assuming.
Yep, right. Paint on that. So what you're looking at on the wall is like a piece of canvas that's put on a mold with some fabric stiffener, and then on the back I put layers of plaster, and then pull the whole thing off of the mold, and so it's in this just like lovely, like shell-like shape.
Yeah.
And the plaster, I found this stuff. I was looking into paper recipes. That's what I was embarking down, and then I found this gauze that's pre-loaded with plaster, and you just wet it like as if you were going to make a cast.
Oh, nice.
And that's what I'm working with, because it's just
that's
dunk it
convenient
in the water. And then any tutorials you get are going to be like, I haven't found many people using it in an art application giving YouTubes, but it's kind of a fun rabbit hole to go down.
Maybe you should make a video.
I know, but like now I can make jewelry. Now I can make anything out of this plaster stuff. You can make anything. Yeah, and like 2 layers of it makes it pretty hard.
Wow.
So
Nice.
yeah, pretty immediate. I like things that happen quickly.
Yeah, it's convenient. Like whenever you can reduce friction in your studio to like make something like, we love to see it. It's so nice.
Reduce friction. I'll start using that.
What is your favorite tool in your studio right now?
Favorite tool in my studio? Oh, wow. I just cleaned up. This place was intense yesterday.
Thank you.
To me, yeah, I just cleaned up. So I'm like, where are my tools? I can't see a thing. I mean, I guess I would say a paintbrush. I have been enjoying this golden product called GAC 400.
So good.
Yeah. It's have you used all the GAC ones, or the 400?
I know 400 because I
You know
use it
400?
for priming some of my linen canvases.
Okay, because
Yeah.
it makes it harder.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like with a couple layers, it gets pretty stiff. And it's like a nice feeling on the linen. Interesting. I didn't think about using it as a primer.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to use gesso.
I use gesso on top of that, but it doesn't soak up as much of some of my other layers that I put on. And it's like, otherwise it's just like going into the fiber and you're just like going through so much product. And it's nice. If you're interested in seeing my like system for making canvas, I'll make a video on that, but you have to leave a comment.
Awesome. I want to see it. Comment now.
I want to talk about ideas, because we've talked a little about, nature and the forest, but I want to talk about like, how do ideas come to you? If you can answer that.
Yeah. Such a great question. They might come in several ways, because they certainly, the most immediate way is they come through being in a place and getting a photo. And my husband takes great photos, and I'm like, take that one. Ooh, get that light. So it's already like right there in the space. I know that I want to work with something, but then I get a library of like hundreds of photos, and then I go through them. So sometimes it's that. And so then the next idea would be which of those light up for me.
Right.
So maybe that's like a way of sifting. But sometimes I'm looking into the future and it's like an open canvas. I don't have any projects on the horizon, and an idea will fill that. A while ago, I was like, oh, I'd like to make a series of pieces that like this in one diptychs, like the sun will be coming in one piece, and on the other piece, it's what the sun is shining on, and then it got really elaborate into like matching up with gemstones and in the zodiac wheel. But then, eventually those ideas. So sometimes you get so many ideas and then you're working with a project and you realize, oh, it was just really all about these 2 paintings that came out of those 12 that really like, and then I don't even need to talk about the original idea anymore about the sun coming through and the sun being on something.
I find it's easy for ideas to get complicated really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And knowing like when to say yes to something is tricky. Do you find that it's easy for you to choose what is worthy of becoming art?
Oh, yeah, because it all is. Seems like.
Because they all feel like they have value at first, right?
Oh, the ideas?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Right. Maybe it's like they all feel worthy, and then I work with them and just see what sticks and what. And then the surprising thing that I find to be so joyful is that you don't even know what you think you're working on one thing, and then you let that sit, and then you realize a year later that it actually was right in line with some other ideas.
Oh, yeah.
That you were, like I got into working with these diptychs because I wanted to talk about connection between 2 things, and specifically downloads from above and the like connection between above and below. And then I was realizing I've been doing this all the time with my 2D paintings because I've been thinking about the sun and the reflection on the water from rowing days. And I was just like, oh, it's always been this like, vertical stacking of things for me and the connection between the 2. And so sometimes I think we have this brand new idea, but it's always already been in us. So it's in a way, maybe we're just like, like peeling away layers of what's already been in there.
Sometimes I have ideas and I realize that they've gone back years and years and years into my past, and I just like it, but they like return, and you're like, oh, is it time for this idea? Like you might have one way at the beginning, and then beginning of making art, and then it shows up and it's like, okay, it's my turn now.
Yeah. I remember that in college. It would be like I was really into shadows, but I didn't know what to do with them. But then I'm still into shadows. Like, and they found a way in. Like, yeah, I get that.
It's fun to have them like mold and evolve and then potentially get created.
I know, and then it makes you think that the times when you felt like you had these ideas and you're kind of confused, like, why do I have this idea? And you're like, I'm just a confused person that actually like, no, you're going to need that someday.
It was being born.
Yeah.
Babies are always confused.
Yes, babies are always... Or the babies actually know, but they can't tell you.
It's true. They don't know how to do the language part, the making part.
Right.
That's so funny. I'd love to hear about your daily practice at this point.
Ooh,
like,
okay.
What does a typical studio day look like for you? You've gotten dressed. What happens?
Well, sometimes I'm still in my pajamas.
You got your pajamas.
Let's not assume that
You got out of bed.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I know. I can go through some real like nesting times where the like winter bathrobe will be around all day. But I kind of have, I probably didn't realize this until I was married and Dave could mirror back to me that I pretty much start like around 3 painting wise. My hours are like from 3 to 10. Maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
But I still consider the whole day a painting day. I don't really even like to have a half-hour appointment somewhere in there because it's just like, oh gosh, the whole day is gone.
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. And I spend a lot of the morning when I'm really into something. I work in the morning too. But if I'm just in the idea phase, I'll spend a lot of the morning walking around, looking at stuff. It looks like I'm not doing anything, but I'm doing something.
I feel like all artists know that doing nothing is a critical part of being an artist.
Yeah,
it looks like you're not doing things, but you are.
I remember the trajectory of needing a lot of support from friends around that. Like, no, you are doing something. Okay, it's okay. Yeah.
The curse of being productive, especially as Americans, is like so intense. Like the pressure, it's like you must be doing something all the time. And it's like just being still is part of the creative process. So if you're like fighting this, listener, just let yourself be still. It's part of making. It's part of like developing your ideas, and it's part of just observing.
Yeah, because there will be other times where you don't know why, but you're working 12 hours a day. I know everybody's different. I'm into that. Like some people like more routine, like a day job sort of feeling. And that's the one thing so beautiful about life, but also beautiful about art is that you get to make that up. But I feel like I fall in the category of going when it's time.
Do you have any like rituals you do before you start in the studio, like 3 p.m. or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the ritual is just a lot of sitting around until it's time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a ritual. That's the only thing that's consistent. So is that a ritual? Is that what
I guess like if it works.
Yeah.
Mine is I always make a pot of tea before I start painting.
Yes, that's very
so
beautiful.
I have something like some caffeine ready to go, like at any moment. But walk me through what the studio time looks like. Like say you're about to paint today. Like what's the plan?
Okay. Well, I suppose it depends on where I am in the project. Sometimes it is finding the images. Sometimes it's these underpaintings. I love to start my paintings in such a free, unbridled, sort of expressive way. And I will think about what it might feel like to be inside of a gemstone and zoom in that gemstone and then just like paint those colors. And that's straight up like paint, like squirting it right on the canvas. It's just such a lovely time because that's so many fun marks come from that. Mm-hmm. And then I might do that for like 6 canvases at once so that I can have a lot to choose from when I'm making my next decisions.
Nice. Yeah. It's nice to have a couple. I am the opposite. I work on one at a time and sometimes I'm like, I should loosen up.
Yeah.
Start something else.
Making the segue to these sculptures, they're different for me because they require physical work and that seems for me to take longer. So I can be spending literally all day doing things. Like I'm picking stuff up, cutting things. I've had to approach it differently. Like I can't make as many choices in one day with these sculptures because it just physically you can't because they're big. So if I want to change one whole side, it's like, well, that's a lot of, I got to, take that gauze down and then dye it and then hang it up and then put it. I mean, I think part of what I love about painting is it is so immediate. It's not like printmaking where I need to think a few steps ahead.
Right.
I can just go for it. And it's been a process with these sculptures to work with them and their magnitude, give them and honor that and know that it will just take me longer.
Right.
And I'm just much more physically tired.
Interesting. When do you call it quits for the day? Like, is there a moment where you stop, you're like working on a piece, you're like, this is a stopping point, or you're like, I'm tired, or it's like, oh, it's 10 o'clock on the dot?
Yeah, I think one fun thing with my studio practice anyway is that I'm not tired if I'm engaged. It really won't. I will keep going. So I'm not really thinking about the time. That's why I also don't like to have a reason to have to leave at a certain time. And then sometimes I'll just notice my interest peters out, and then I think that comes from maybe years of trust, like years of doing it to where you're like, oh yeah, I'm in it. I have something to do. And now I don't know what to do right now. So that probably means either start something else or wait till tomorrow. I think that's because I think the work asks thing, it's like it tells you what to do next a lot of times. So if it's not doing that, that might be where I just make my choices.
I usually have about 3 hours to be in a painting a day.
Okay.
Before my interest wanes and I start like thinking about laundry or whatever. And like the next thing, and then I move on to a different aspect of the art business. But it's interesting to see how other people make things.
It is interesting because I hear how long are our attention spans, like all these things talked about, and to think like 3 hours, that's a long time to focus on something if you're really in it.
Did you find that your art making process changed after you, I guess, moved in with someone else? Because mine did.
Okay. How did yours change?
I would often forget time and I would get so hungry I'd get the shakes.
Okay.
Just completely ignoring my physical self. But now that I have someone I live with, my partner, I'm 7 o'clock comes around and I start noticing his patterns change in the house and things like that. And I'm like, oh, that's different. And it breaks it.
Yeah. I would say mine lines up pretty similarly because if Dave's out of town, I'm like, oh, I should plan ahead. I should get some food in this. I should get some food pre-made,
exactly.
as if I've never cooked before. But
it's It's not good or bad. It just changed.
I also had the benefit of Dave and I align on maybe the way we see color, I think might be the most accurate way to talk about it so that we can talk about my paintings.
Nice.
And that's like been really nice to have, I don't want to say immediate feedback, but, collaboration.
Definitely trusted feedback.
Trusted feedback in that I don't really have to wait until I have a studio visit. Mm-hmm. So I'm generally impatient when it comes to the...
Tell me now.
things. Yeah, what's next? It's so hard to be confused. Yeah, so that changed.
What is something that you find steals time away from your art making?
That's an interesting question. I've spent several years kind of organizing my life to where art is able to be a priority. Mm-hmm. I don't know that anything steals my time because I think that the work needs me to step away from it sometimes. So if I'm doing something else, it's probably just a flow, but maybe it's just constant attuning to where I'm at in that process. Like, am I avoiding it or am I giving it space? Yeah.
That's a great answer.
I feel really lucky in that way to be able to let the work drive a lot of my life.
I find that I have to be protective of my time because I try to fit so much in my days that if I schedule an appointment anywhere near the art making hours, I'm just messing with myself. I'm just like ruining the day.
Yeah.
And like being really diligent about that boundary is really important. But it's different for everyone.
Now that you say that, I do on the practical sense. Like I have a term, I say I'm in art jail. If I'm in a period, I say art jail. It's like I learned that from a girl I was in a residency with years ago. Yeah, it's art jail, and it just cracked me up, and I've never lost that term because it's just a way to say socially, like you're not able to come out and play.
Yeah,
but really, I want to be in the jail. It's not a bad thing, but at certain times is like I'm kind of in art jail now because of these sculptures, and I haven't come to any sort of solution with them yet. So, but then other times I'm not.
Right. It's good.
It's a boundary thing.
It's a boundary. Sometimes I see this with artists where they will say, okay, I'm going to go make art now. And people, especially those who they live with, don't treat that as like, this is the job that's happening or this is like the priority that's happening. They're like, oh, you're making art. I can go hang out with you and, talk to you the entire time or something like that. Yeah. Or they'll be like, oh, okay, well, that means you can come help me with this chore I'm doing or things like that. And it's definitely a boundary. So I like art jail. Yeah. That's fun.
I know. And it's a crazy one because no one's going to make you go do something else. It's that internal knowing that it's your priority.
Totally.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be, I remember that. I remember that trajectory, learning that it was up to me to
protect it.
Yeah.
Now I want to hear about some of your inspirations. Who are some of your favorite living artists right now?
That question. There are so many that I feel like Instagram kind of opened up a world to me to be able to see
magic.
What's going on in all the other cities in the country in terms of what shows are opening, and then you get to see people walk through. Yeah. I have there's a million, but Kiki Smith is one that rises to the top and who's really on my mind now. I feel like, especially opening up again to this 3D work, and it was my first art book I ever got when I was with the Half Price Books, and I remember that book. I need to get another copy of it. So much to say about her, but I think I don't even wow. It's a feeling.
It's a feeling.
Yeah. I feel like she plays a lot more with the variety of materials, but what's at the core of that for me is letting the work drive the decisions, and I feel like that's something I've experienced. I don't know that I set out to do that. I didn't say I'm going to let the work drive my next choices, but I've experienced that, what it's like to make a series and then say, oh, it's, I want to push it this way next time because of what I'm seeing here. And that's just such a joy because it's not to any end, but it's a conversation.
Right. She's fantastic.
Yeah. You resonate with her too.
I love her work, and it's every time I see it, I'm just like, yeah.
It's a feeling. Yeah. It's a feeling. Yeah.
It's so good.
Oh, that's so cool.
What's some advice you would give a beginner artist?
beginner artist.
Maybe they wanted to do something that's similar to what you're doing.
Okay, because I think of my work as maybe more on the intuitive side of things and less process-based, I would say that it would be to paint or whatever method you're choosing, and then let it sit and start something else. It's not going to tell you if you don't have any more ideas or know the next move. It's okay to move on to the next thing, because then you'll either never go back to that, or you will go back because you'll learn something else. And that's just the beauty of not forcing stuff, and also thinking like I know the feeling of like, but I had so many great ideas about this painting, and I wanted this painting to be the painting that encapsulates everything. And
oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and thinking like actually it's about making it's the next one and the next one, and then if you make 10, then you can step back and look at all of them and then see what's really happening. So I think that's the advice is just to not put all the pressure on one piece.
Don't be afraid to not finish things.
Yeah.
Don't force the end. If you can't figure out the painting now, try again later. Keep trying new things. Do lots of starts. That's what I'm hearing.
You find the starts might actually have the gem in it already.
Exactly.
You're like, oh yeah.
Great advice. What's next for you and your art?
Oh, next for me, my art. I am making these large sculptures to be in a 3-month installation at the San Juan Island Museum of Art.
Oh, cool.
That's in March through June. I guess through early June. March 6th is the opening. So what's next is working on these guys in the studio. There's 2 of the 6 that are going to be there, and they're kind of like 8 feet tall each.
Oh my gosh.
With 2, yeah. So they'll stack on top of each other.
Cool.
Yeah. Really cool. It's so just such a complete joy to have a place to be able to put these, so that I can have this winter, the fall and the winter to get this idea out.
Nice.
Wow. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Winter is so good for finishing things and incubating ideas, and it's just like something about the darkness that just like gets you back in the studio.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, and then definitely like this September was pretty hot for me, because it was like, back to school, like now it's time to pull in all the ideas from summer. And ongoing, I have paintings at AMCE in Seattle and
Fabulous.
Seattle Art Museum Gallery, which is just, so part of what's next is just like continuing to be a part of this community in Seattle, and I love it.
Heck yeah. Thanks for being on the podcast, Niki.
Aww.
This was a lot of fun. We did
it. Does everybody know what these microphones are?
They're paintbrushes.
These microphones are clipped to paintbrushes, so
they're so cute.
how fun is that? Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.